Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Saturday, February 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 210 days. I will do the math for you. That is exactly 30 weeks. The game against Michigan in 294 days. Yeah, we're talking football at the start of every show, and we're going to be talking football during the show, even though it is February 4th right now. And we're going to be talking about a couple of the more interesting positional battles on the show, on the team this year. I think the quarterback position is going to get the most attention, but it's quite possible that the offensive line is going to be the most important battle and the one that determines perhaps exactly how far this year's Ohio State team can go. My guest today is Tony Gerdeman. Tony has been tracking on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com a running list of the projected two deep for the team. And Tony, how many versions are you on now? What version are you up to?
This is version 9, and there have been, sometimes the versions change during the day, so there could be 3 versions of version 3. There's actually 2 versions of version 9, but because it happened so quickly, I decided just to keep it 1, and that was for me putting the list out to then checking some of the transcripts and seeing Justin Fry talking about Carson Hinsman at center. Then it's like, well, now I'm going to alter that, but I didn't want to put the entire list back out again just because of one thing. So I snuck Carson Hinsman there at center. My finger was not off the checker yet entirely. The food was only on the floor for 4.5 seconds, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the big data point change that we have this week is we got to talk to a bunch of the assistant coaches, all of the assistant coaches, plus Ryan Day, and kind of got a little bit of a where things stand right now from them, a little status update from them. And I guess let's start with that offensive line. It is, I think, the most unpredictable of all of the position groups this year, just because the way they will shuffle guys around and the number of returning starters who are not back, there are seemingly, this is one of these things where if you do the math, there are probably like 64,000 different combinations of offensive linemen that they could have starting that first game at Indiana. So, let's start at left tackle. That is a spot that has been vacated by current NFL draft prospect and beef jerky expert, Paris Johnson. He is, if you have not seen, by the way, Paris Johnson is selling beef jerky for charity. You can find that on his Twitter account to support his foundation. So who do you have in line right now as the most likely, 1 and 2 to replace Paris Johnson at that left tackle spot?
Yeah, and really this has been perhaps the biggest change because of the first 8 editions, I have been putting Donovan Jackson as the number 1, with the thought that they talked about him possibly being a left tackle last year. If they need to, they can move him. And remember, in the spring, he was the next left tackle in the spring game after Paris Johnson. And so you look at who they don't have coming back at tackle and the need. So I kept having Donovan Jackson there. And then pretty early on, Ryan Day in his press conference, after saying he's not going to get into who's moving later on, then said Donovan Jackson is staying at guard. So that, to me, that means Donovan Jackson is staying at guard in the spring. So now, and this is something we've talked about in the past, if Josh Fryer is the best tackle on the team, shouldn't he be at left tackle rather than left tackle rather than right tackle? Right tackle is where he played as a backup to DeJuan Jones in 2022. I asked Justin Fry about that, and he's like, well, you got to figure out which side he plays best on, the whole left brain, right brain. Some guys can prefer one side to the other. So right now, I have Josh Fryer or Zen Michalski as the number 1 at left tackle. And that to me is maybe the left brain, right brain thing in terms of, is Josh Fryer able to play on the left side? They're going to find out. We don't know. And I think a lot of this spring is going to be, it's going to be a refrain. We don't know until you actually start seeing it. So right now, long answer short, Tom, Josh Fryer and Zen Michalski at left tackle.
And I think the interesting thing is the third most likely person to be the starting left tackle this year, if it's not one of those two guys, if it's not going to be Donovan Jackson, it might be someone who's not on the roster yet, because the sort of unspoken subtext to all of this is we'll see how the spring goes, and if it doesn't go well, they may have to go dip into the portal and try and find someone else. It doesn't sound like is there anyone else that you would have kind of in that boat as more likely than, some kind of a theoretical tackle transfer possibility?
Not really. And this to me, I was just thinking about a little bit ago, like this feels like they want to know whether or not they need to go into the portal and get a tackle. And this is going to tell them. If they try Donovan Jackson there, things are like, well, it's not so bad. Like, I don't think they want to know yes or no. And by having Zen Michalski and Josh Fryer and Tigger Shabola as another name in there, by having some of those guys, George Fitzpatrick, we'll talk about those guys, they need to know if these guys can play. And that was one of the other things that the coaches talked about. You have to move them around a little bit to find out who can play where. But once you figure that out, you need to get them situated and get them homes. And I think if you just go through the spring and keep Donovan Jackson where he is, and you're just playing the tackles at tackles, that's going to tell you whether or not you need to go to the portal for sure. And that will also allow the coaches to tell everybody out in the college football universe, as I've been saying, they're going to let people know that there's a starting job available. And there are going to be some people who weren't necessarily thinking about transferring suddenly be like, you know what, I could go play at Ohio State. And so I think, I love it here at wherever, but Ohio State is Ohio State, and this is an opportunity that you can't really turn down. Even though I wasn't thinking about transferring, there are guys probably not thinking about transferring now who would hear about this and be, this is something that I want to explore.
Yeah, there has been. I just saw a little bit of a study on the number of guys who have transferred up and transferred down, just using the SP Plus rankings for teams. And the number of guys who transfer up is almost as high as the number of guys who transfer down. It was maybe 60-40 or something like that, but it was a surprisingly high number of guys transferring up in terms of program quality. And for Ohio State, obviously, I don't know that they've ever had anyone transfer up in terms of program quality. Maybe Jamison Williams, if you want to make that argument, but there have not been very many. A lot more guys transferring down, but for guys who have the opportunity to play at an Ohio State, I think that's probably a very difficult thing for them to turn down if that opportunity does become available. Let's move on to left guard before we turn this into a 47-minute morning show. Donovan Jackson and Enoch Vimahi there. I think that is one of the easiest, cleanest. If these guys are at guard, that's who's going to be at left guard, and that's who's going to be the starter there. But also, boy, it would be really surprising to me if Enoch Vimahi isn't one of the 5 best somewhere. I mean, he was sort of in that circle of trust in that top 7 last year. He played, in the Michigan game last year, meaningful minutes in the Michigan game last year. It feels like it would be surprising to me if he wasn't a starter somewhere this year.
Well, and remember, he has also played tackle at Ohio State in his time. So that is also maybe, can he do right tackle if you find out that Josh Fryer is good at left tackle? So I think I'm with you. It would be a little bit surprising him. This is his 5th year, I think, coming in. And so he's been on the outskirts, and then last year as that 7th guy. But do you go from 7th year or seventh man to 6th man this year? I think it's all just because of that left tackle situation where that just changes things. And now everybody says they'll play the 5 best. And if Enoch Vimahi is one of your 5 best and Zen Michalski isn't, then who is your left tackle? Is it Josh Fryer? Is it Donovan Jackson? Do they want to go that way? And then we have argued in the past, is the 5 best really the best way to go at this? Sometimes the number 6 is better because he makes a certain position stronger. And so they've got to weigh all of those things and see how it goes. And even if he's not in the starting lineup, he's going to be he's going to be that Bison tight end. He's going to be that 6th man. He's going to be in there somewhere. But once Ryan Day said that Donovan Jackson and Matt Jones are staying at guard, that kind of, creates a situation for Enoch Vamahi. Like, where does he go now? And I don't know that there's been really any talk about him playing center.
Well, and there was talk, that Matt Jones will stay at guard. I still think, and you have in here that there is sort of this unspoken, but maybe secretly it will be Matt Jones playing center, because they have a whole bunch of options at center, but they don't have anything proven at center. And there is a real, there's at least a possibility that Matt Jones moves over to center. And then if he does, then, well, Enoch Vamahi's your right guard, and bing, bang, boom, we have solved the Enoch Vamahi dilemma. But, if it is not Matt Jones at center, if someone else wants that center job this spring or later in the year, that would certainly be a good thing if they have someone who they're very comfortable with at center. There are 4 names you've got here. One of them's a walk-on, one of them's injured, one of them hasn't really played much, and one of them just transferred from Louisiana Monroe. So I don't know that I feel like there's a sure thing there, but who are the options at center, and how would you maybe rank the possibility of those guys winning the starting job?
Yeah, and the guy from Louisiana Monroe, Vic Cutler, played left tackle last year. So not a lot of experience here at center. Maybe Toby Wilson being the most experienced, because and he didn't. I don't even know he really played left or center last year. I think he was at guard. He played center the year before, but Jacob James, he was the de facto backup. But of course, he's out this spring getting something cleaned up. So this is another situation where they're going to find out. They brought Vic Cutler in to try to win that center job, and they're going to find out pretty early on. But then also, it's going to be rough early on. So you've got to be able to allow him to grow into it, learn the offense. And, it's just imagine if there's in a situation of him not being here this spring, and your number one center then is, Carson Hinsman or Toby Wilson, who you don't expect to start, or, is Josh Padilla, the true freshman, he's in for spring. Like, these are guys that you don't expect to start, but they're getting all of the center reps in the spring. So it's good that Vic Cutler is in and has an opportunity to establish himself. I do wonder, there's an alternate reality where Josh Fryer is your center, because he can play anywhere, and he's been talked about as having been able to do that, but they can't. He's one of your tackles, so he's got to be kind of out of the center situation. And again, I just keep going back to they've got to move guys around to figure out where they can play, but you can't do it too long before you then have to figure out, can they play where you've put them? And so just having Cutler in, I think, is huge for the entire offense, just as huge for the offense as it is for him.
And so assuming that one of those guys is the center, Matt Jones is very clearly your starter at right guard. And then after him, Enoch Vamahi is probably the backup at either or both of the guard spots. But if Enoch Vamahi is starting, or Enoch Vamahi has to slide in at left guard or whatever, then the backup spot at the right guard spot is just a list of, it's basically the phone book at this point. Like, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names, including Vamahi, listed as potential backups there. And then also it ends with or, and I think there's sort of an implied ellipses at the end there where it's like, yeah, or any of a bunch of other guys too.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of names there, and some of these are second, third year guys where it's time for somebody to step up. You don't expect all of your second year guys to play in their second year, but it's nice when one of them does, and they can get something out of there to not just build depth, but be able to be used in case something happens. And it's rare that your offensive line goes through an entire season with nothing happening. So you want those guys to not just be the backup, but be able to play should they be called upon.
All right. And so now we get to right tackle. And if Zen Michalski wins the left tackle job, then that makes the right tackle job a pretty nice, easy, clean thing. And if Zen Michalski does not win the left tackle job, and you have Josh Fryer over there at left tackle, it gets a little more complicated who the starting right tackle is. Yeah,
and there's some convolutedness to this on my right tackle, because I have it as like Josh Fryer or Taker Shabola or Zen Michalski or George Fitzpatrick. Obviously, if Zen Michalski wins the left tackle job, I'm going to take that or away from Josh Fryer. Like, there's an or here just because he may win the left tackle job. So I I don't know all of my rules on why I do these things, Tom, but it's the winner of this is going to, I think, one of these four. I feel pretty confident about that. Josh Fryer, Tigger Shabola, Zen Mahalski, or maybe George Fitzpatrick in there. And honestly, if one of those four can't win the right tackle job or isn't playing the right tackle job, or I guess maybe the left tackle job, then they've really, really gotten themselves into a bind with their recruiting and their development. Tigger Shabola played left guard last year and played a handful of games as a true freshman. I believe he's still waiting to get his black stripe off, but he's been playing. Now they're moving him to tackle, and we'll see what he can do in the spring. But it's time for the young guys in the depth to emerge and be starters. I mean, you've lost 2 NFL offensive tackles. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and they also lost a center, and from talking to the coaches this week, it sounds like that kind of caught us off guard a little bit. It was like you knew he was draft eligible, but he wasn't necessarily someone you expected you had sort of penciled in to leave after 3 years. And it sounded like that kind of caught the coaches off guard as well. So that's one of the reasons that it may seem like, they're shuffling some extra pieces, and they brought in a guy from the transfer portal to maybe potentially fill one of those spots. So there are a lot of moving pieces here, but this does feel like, of any of the positional battles, I mean, corner is going to be important. Safety is going to be important, all those different spots, and obviously quarterback. But man, it feels like the thing that might have the biggest impact on what this team's ceiling is this fall, the positional group that I think I'm going to be watching most closely, is the offensive line. I mean, do you think there's any group that might have a bigger impact on what this team could be this fall?
Yeah, no, I think it controls the basement and the ceiling for this team, honestly. And the quarterback is going to be good enough, but he's going to be made great by the offensive line or poor by the offensive line. And if they get great offensive line play, then really there should be no excuses for this team in terms of reaching close to their potential.
So this will be something that we will continue to watch. Tony is on version 9, as we said, of this depth chart. And, at one point during the course of this episode, I was like, he's going to have another version because I just brought up a name he hadn't considered. So that's this is going to be something we will undoubtedly continue to monitor as we sort of go through the spring and the summer and head into the fall. But definitely a big storyline to watch this year for Ohio State. So if you would like to watch this develop in real time on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com, you can sign up today to become a member. Tony does this. He also does his What I Know, What I Think, What I Wonder column. It's very popular every week. We have lots of other member exclusive content there, including a lot of Alex Gleitman's ADEC columns, the daily Eyes on the Trail recruiting feature that Alex and Mark Givler do, Mark's Skull Session column every week. It is all exclusive to members at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Great in-depth reporting and coverage, plus the X's and O's guys, Tony, Kevin, and I covering the team. It is all there at BuckeyeHuddle.com, so sign up today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.